Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the next session of what's been a fantastic Beyond 2020 so far. My name is Professor Caroline Scarles, and I'm very pleased to be hosting the session titled Next Moves for the Visitor Experience. Now, today the whole focus has been on convergence and different kind of ideas of convergence as we bring people together from different disciplines, from different areas of the industry. And, you know, the conversations, I'm sure you'll agree, so far have been absolutely fascinating. So the session today, we're going to be building on some of the areas from conversations yesterday. So people like Johnny Freeman or Anne Taglioni were talking around audience engagement and how we can use different types of mixed reality and augmented reality and virtual experiences to engage audiences in different ways. So today I'm joined by a panel of absolutely wonderful experts. I've had the pleasure of speaking to them and having conversations with them in the lead up to this. And I'm really pleased to introduce, so first of all, we have Sam Smith. Now, Sam is from Eden International. He has worked across most of the Eden department since he first joined when he was a mere 15-year-old. So yeah, been there a long time then, Sam. And Sam, he says he's a proud generalist. So he's a social anthropologist and international development practitioner by training. And he is a published novelist as well as all the wonderful work that he does within the Eden project, both national within the UK and international across the world. So we're really excited to have you join us, Sam. Thank you very much for being here.
Hey, everyone.
We also have John Cassie, and John, again, really exciting work that you're doing around the robots and dinosaurs work. So John is the founder and chief executive of Factory 42, which is one of the UK's leading immersive content studios. Now, John is working with a whole range of real kind of world-leading experts in this area from a whole range of different disciplines. So looking then at the fact that, again, bringing people together, this idea of convergence. So John, you're currently working with people such as Sky, BBC, Google, Facebook, National History Museum, Science Museum, and university collaborations down through the University of Exeter, where you're also a visiting professor, an honorary professor, I believe as well. And then finally, I'd like to introduce Susan Cummings. Now, Susan is managing director of Tiny Rebel Games, but is also one of the co-founders of Fictioneers. Again, really excited, and I know Joanna's was very particularly excited about the work that you're doing around the Big Fix Up and the Wallace and Gromit in Bristol. So looking at how we're using mixed and augmented reality solutions to really explore ideas of storytelling and engaging with audiences in a whole range of new and exciting different ways. So I'm really pleased to bring these three speakers together, these three panelists. I'm sure it'll be a really interesting and engaging session as we move through each of these world-leading examples. Now, of course, one of the big challenges that we have within the visitor experiences at this point in time and in the visitor economy is very much around, of course, the big shifts that have happened in COVID and how people are able to engage with solutions, how we've been hearing a lot in the last day and a half around how these augmented and mixed reality solutions and virtual productions encourage people to engage in different ways. Now, I know for sure that, you know, Susan, John, Sam, you all work in very much location-based areas. So we'll be chatting about a whole range of different things about how you can start moving from location-based into more home-based solutions. And we'll be looking at how COVID has disrupted the visitor experience, but also some of the many opportunities, particularly through storytelling, that can be realised. So to start us off, we have a really exciting initial video that is all around the Big Fix Up. So we're just going to run that video for you now.
It's very exciting having Wallace and Gromit involved in this project.
Step on it, Gromit. There's not a moment.
The Big Fix Up just feels like a great fit.
It's a brand new Wallace and Gromit story. Video, gameplay, comic strips, all held together by an app that people will download and have on their smartphone.
Audiences will interact with Wallace and Gromit via calls, texts, and even holographic messages.
When you can say a rocket appears in your back garden, it's just a fundamental reshaping of what storytelling is.
At Fictioneers, we're creating an underlying platform that manages the delivery of the story, while giving us the ability to flex it and compress it according to the narrative. It can cover multiple media types, from CG animations to AR experiences, so it's been a really valuable tool.
As an employee of Spick and Spanners, Wallace and Gromit's brand new company, you interact with them every day if you want to, while you're taking part, doing a job for Wallace or helping Gromit out.
The Big Fix Up is different to anything I've ever worked on before. Using an app to look at the real world and see AR elements come into life was just completely new to me, really exciting.
You get the opportunity to place your contraptions and machines that you make actually in the world using augmented reality.
The established characters of Wallace and Gromit and our new characters of Bernard Grubb and Lily Hackaby have all gone through the same evolution. Essentially, we made master sculpts with a one-colour clay so that they had all the correct proportions and texture. We then scanned them using the latest 3D scanning technology, so we had a complete 360 digital representation of Wallace and Gromit.
It's not a sit-back experience. It's playful and exciting and engaging and funny.
Wallace is an inventor, he loves technology, and he would embrace this wholeheartedly and give it a big thumbs up.
By heck, Gromit, these job orders are really taking the biscuit. Oh. To the spick and span mobile. If we're going to fix up a whole city, we're going to need a recruitment drive. Step on it, Gromit. There's not a moment to lose. The Big Fix-Up needs your help. Get cracking.
So I'm sure you'll see it's really exciting stuff there coming through from the Fictioneers. Really interested and can't wait to be talking to Susan about some of that in just a moment. So next I'm going to pass you to Sam Smith. Welcome, Sam, who's going to share some more around the work that Eden International are doing.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Sam. I head the creative and content team at Eden Project International, and I'm going to take you through a few of the projects we're doing around the world. But I thought, firstly, we'd quickly show you some of the work in Cornwall, just in case you don't know us down in the southwest. So the Eden Project was created to explore how we could better address some of the urgent problems of the world today. So our first project was to take a derelict mine in a region that was economically struggling. And in it, we built probably the largest man-made immersive environment. So our rainforest biome is an extraordinary stage to explore humanity's relationship to the natural world. And in Cornwall, we did this using plants as our core theme. So we combine world-class education and art, science and research with performance, leading regenerative solutions with storytelling, and festivals with community projects undertaken by millions every year. So far, it has generated more than £2 billion from an investment of 140 million in just under 20 years. So this is why Eden is approached to work on projects all around the world. And with the rising threats of the planetary emergency, we likewise feel we need a global network of extraordinary broadcast hubs that can help catalyze a transformed relationship between people and the natural world. So Eden is an organization inspired by the principles of theatre, the application of science, and the imagination of the creative industries to bring people together from across the globe. We have established partnerships and relationships with creative people around the world, and our desire is to provoke marvelous, beautiful, healthy, inspirational things to evolve into a system where the sum of the parts add up to far more than the whole. So 20 years on, Eden is creating new beacons of hope and transformation. This approach is championed by new Eden designed and operated destinations, which will harness 2 decades of award-winning experience in Cornwall, along with the new possibilities of technology, thinking and practice that have developed across all sectors. In particular, how technology allows us to take visitors to places or reveal systems otherwise inaccessible. We work across all continents with a mix of partners, including national and local governments, indigenous councils, mining companies, sustainable businesses, communities, and startups. And as the new generation of Eden projects emerge, we will set new precedents for what a visitor destination should try and be, using a deeply co-creative approach to create visitor journeys that fuse multiple forms of experience, performance, education, art, immersive digital and research that will inspire wonder, curiosity, reflection and action, as well as a built environment that seamlessly supports and brings to life the experiences within iconic venues that set new standards in regenerative design. Importantly, we want to have all of these projects having connections to neighbouring communities and environments that catalyse wider environmental, social and economic transformation. So I'm going to try and quickly do a whirlwind tour of some of these destinations. Our first project is in Qingdao, which is a coastal city between Shanghai and Beijing, which will see our first fully open New Eden. Construction is underway and will be open in 2023. Eden Qingdao will explore the life-giving nature of water in all of its forms. We're building a range of venues and landscapes to immerse visitors in the wonders of water, thematically split between the three themes of water which will define the 21st century, of its abundance, its scarcity, and its quality. The largest biome structure in the world will be home to an extraordinary fusion of immersive adventure, as visitors follow the water cycle up a mythical mountain into extreme weather, bioluminescent caves, and canopy tree houses. Combining world-class immersive media, art, exhibition, design, and performance, we will reimagine the possibilities of a planted environment, ensuring no visitor will leave their relationship to water changed again. The next project sees us go to Morecambe in the UK, which reimagines a seaside resort for the 21st century. Using the stunning setting of Morecambe Bay as inspiration, we'll create a colony of pavilions and observatories that fuse natural wonder, health and well-being. An adventure across land and sea and the flooding and ebbing spaces in between, it will explore our intimate relationship with the natural world. A celebration of the senses and the fundamental rhythms that dictate life on Earth, it will act as a lens for all visitors to look at the bay and the planet with new eyes. Its core venues are respectively dedicated to the rhythms of the sun and the moon, giant living theatre sets where hyperreal forests welcome spring blooms and winter snow before lunch, and where full moons rise and bring the tidal ecosystems of the bay to life. We next move to where we've co-led and designed the landscape and visitor experience for the Sustainability Pavilion at Expo 2020 in Dubai, now 2021. So the Sustainability Pavilion is a demonstration of groundbreaking technology and innovative landscaping, providing an adventure that explores our individual and collective responsibilities as citizens on a changing planet. Visitors will journey through a series of immersive galleries, exploring under the ocean and beneath the forest to discover the wonders of the natural world. They will witness how these wonders are consumed by systems that are driven by our own lifestyles and choices. And finally, they will encounter approaches and ideas that will help regenerate the beauty of our planet. The Christchurch Earthquake of 2011 was a tragic reminder of the natural forces around us. And the red zone is an area of landmarked unfit for human settlement in the wake of the earthquake. And this is where Eden will look to braid the histories of the natural world and the people who have inhabited it to explore and celebrate the relationships between nature and culture. The project is driven by a Maori cultural narrative and reflects the interconnectedness of all life and the ways in which the natural world provides for our needs. Biodiversity loss is a critical threat to people and planet, and the sixth extinction places humans as the cause of what will be the biggest extinction event in 65 million years. Yet our inability to address this crisis is a failure of the imagination and not of science. So we must use storytelling to make the emotional connections needed. It must become central to our political, social and economic agenda. Eden Project Portland is located in the awe-inspiring mines and spectacular cliff tops on the Isle of Portland, the UK's only UNESCO World Heritage Site for geological importance. The view is an extraordinary panorama of 185 million years of history of life on Earth, and it was here that the very idea of extinction was first deduced. Eden joined with the original project leaders of Memo, founded by the local sculptor Sebastian Brook, to develop the scheme. The below-ground experience will be the most stunning underground theatre on Earth, in which the stories of biodiversity, evolution and extinction are told through an inspirational fusion of science, art and immersive adventure. Eden has worked with Marshmallow Laser Feast, Vision 3 and Think Design in New York to harness the incredible tunnels into a canvas for extraordinary, powerful experience. And finally, we go to Australia, where Eden Anglesey sees a reimagining of a large open coal mine site off the Great Ocean Road as a beacon for communities and tourism in the region. The coal mine and power station saw humans harness the ancient sunlight locked beneath the soil, and its legacy will be to host Eden Anglesey's new civilization that will capture the sunlight of today. It will do so in partnership with the Wadawurrung traditional owners, being guided by their deep connections to local environments and their long history of regenerative stewardship. I'll hand back over to you.
Thank you, Sam. It sounds absolutely wonderful, and there's so much opportunity there in terms of bringing things to life through the virtual, the mixed, and the augmented reality experience. Now, I'm going to pass to John from Factory 42, who's going to share some more around the dinosaurs and robots. Over to you, John.
Great, thank you, Caroline. That's very kind of you. Yeah, I feel after that incredible global romp from Sam, I feel slightly parochial in some of the things I'm going to talk about. But so really, what I was going to talk about really from this theme around what is happening in visitor experiences was to look at it through the lens of work that we've been doing over a number of years with the Natural History Museum and around a couple of projects. Well, actually 2.5 projects, but I'll explain the half in a minute. The first one is a project that we did called Hold the World, which was with David Attenborough a couple of years back. And this was a virtual reality experience that was interactive. It took you into the museum through a headset and it gave you a one-on-one audience with Sir David, which is what a lot of people would like to have, and then the ability to pick up, manipulate objects that you'd never normally be able to touch or get that close to. And the reason for doing this was to try and find ways to engage particularly younger audiences in museum collections in new ways, and also for those collections to get outside beyond the walls of these incredible buildings in Kensington that many of us love, or millions of us love, and millions visit each year, but not everybody can get to. And so really this was an exercise in how can you use new technology to extend the reach of the visitor experience itself. What it led to was another large project. Just to give you a bit of background. So we as a company have worked with all sorts of different organizations, technology organizations like Apple, Google, Facebook, cultural organizations like the Tate, the Royal Academy. But also now one of our focuses is around another project with the Natural History Museum, but also involving the Science Museum, Sky, the US technology firm Magic Leap, London's Almeida Theatre, and then also the University of Exeter. And we have all been brought together and given support from UKRI, so specifically Innovate UK, to reimagine this whole visitor experience world. And our project is Dinosaurs and Robots. And what it is it's trying to find ways to engage audiences with immersive storytelling around dinosaurs and robots, so themes around science and the natural world. This box here is basically some testing that we did. So this is the Jerwood Gallery in the Natural History Museum, and this box is something that was taken up to the Metro Centre in Gateshead and launched as an immersive experience. Half of it was around robots, where you got to use a mixed reality headset and build your own robot and do a variety of tasks. The other half was a sort of paleontology adventure with dinosaurs and T-Rexes. Now, this was all about taking science and natural world content out of great buildings like the Natural History Museum to high footfall but unexpected locations like the Metro Centre in Gateshead. And it was something that was testing incredibly well until a certain thing called COVID came along. So on the day that we were due to kick in all of our promotion was also the day that social distancing rules came into effect. So very sadly, what had looked like a really cunning plan of gathering groups of strangers together in confined spaces and putting headsets on them suddenly was complete lunacy. So very sadly, we had to put a hold on it, close it down. It is something that we will bring back in the future, but in a sign that everything has changed since then, that shopping centre owner has since gone into administration. Both the museums have shut and everybody is trying to work out where a visitor experience is going. Well, I'll give you a quick video clip of what this thing was like. So hopefully they can run the VT at the minute, I hope. So that gives you a sense of a very different type of museum experience in a busy shopping centre outside of London, which was something that I think the Natural History Museum was really, really great and brave to try and do. And I think that we showed that audiences really found it exciting. But as I say, COVID stopped all of that. And what that then left us with was, what do we do to push this project on, and how can we continue to engage audiences? Now, we very quickly pivoted to creating fun learning apps for kids at home, so using their own devices. And this is an example. And again, I'm just going to play another quick promo of what this product was. So these apps were, they're aimed at audiences, well, they're at kids aimed between the ages of 7 and 12. They went live last half term. They're out in the App Store. They're doing really well. They're being very well in, audiences are really liking, ratings are high. But again, this was a way to get collections into people's homes. So playing with dinosaurs in your home, building robots in your home, doing different types of things in an interactive way. And so really, this is just a whistle-top tour of some of the experiments that we're doing in terms of taking visitor experiences and trying to expand their reach in different ways, either into leisure destinations or into homes. But I'm probably going on too long, so I'll pass back to Caroline. Thanks.
Thank you, John. That's great. And so hopefully that's given you a real insight, a real flavour of the very different projects that each of our panellists are working on at this point in time. Now, Susan, I'm going to come to you first because, you know, John has mentioned, you know, obviously that there was a pivot that they had to make. They launched in the Metro Centre and all of a sudden COVID struck and things had to change. Now, you were due to launch in August 2020, weren't you? So can you talk to us a little bit about how things have become a little bit different for you?
Yeah, so our initial plan had been for this 3-act big fix-up story to lead to a sort of mass descent, if you will. Terrible thing to say right now, a mass descent onto Bristol. And the finale, the act 3 of our story, we LiDAR scans key sections of Bristol, Millennium Square, Queen Square, College Green. And so the plan had been to bring people there to have a city-scale multiplayer AR experience for the finale of the story, which obviously was no longer a responsible thing to do. So what we had to do was reimagine the full big fix-up as something that you could have in the safety of your home or a nearby park or back garden or things like that. And so what we've done is we've taken that LiDAR scan data from Act 3 and we've made that something that you can actually miniaturize on your tabletop or have in your back garden. And it actually looks like you're peering into Bristol, like you have a bird's eye view into Bristol. And so it's essentially, you can't come to Bristol, so we bring Bristol to you. And so when we launch the experience, the complete end-to-end experience will be there. It just won't be something that leads to that live city experience that we'd intended. But that's something that we now plan to deliver in the first part of next year by June. And we're going to put it in 3 cities as the goal, as opposed to only in Bristol.
I mean, it sounds absolutely fantastic. In some ways, actually, the way in which the pandemic has affected all of us and affected the ways in which we engage with digital delivery and digital content in different ways creates opportunities as well. I mean, John, you were talking there about how you were able to switch from that location-based into a more home-based situation. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, yeah, without a doubt, this has been one of the most challenging sort of 9 months of any of our sort of working lives, but it has created an opportunity that we had intended to get into the world of sort of fun learning games, apps, but it was probably 3 years out on our company roadmap. And yet when effectively COVID came along and stopped us doing the thing that we had prioritized, which was location-based experiences, which at the time were very much the proven way to generate audience, generate revenue, the opportunity to fund learning apps became both, well, it was an opportunity and a necessity. So we very quickly pulled together a business case for it. Innovate, our main funders, were incredibly supportive, incredibly responsive, and have been amazing at kind of backing both the sort of creative ambition and the sort of technical R&D that we're doing. And so we worked rather crazily over the summer months to get these ready for the half-term in the October half term and get these out there. And so far it's been really good. I mean, there are very clear learning objectives built into them. We work very closely with the museums experts, some other learning experts that we brought in from outside. And it's that combination, I think, of creativity, educational knowledge and technology that's enabling us to engage kids in dinosaur adventures in their own living rooms and really learn things about paleontology, about different time eras together. So it's been a great adventure, not without its stresses, but it's been really good.
I mean, just bringing a dinosaur into your living room is exciting in and of itself, isn't it, really? So, but I think that sense of, the whole theme today is convergence, and this idea of really learning from the knowledge and experience of the different partners that you all have within your collaborations. Again, that leads to a certain agility, it leads to a certain level of adaptation that perhaps, as we said, wasn't necessarily something that we were anticipating. But Sam, just coming to you from an Eden perspective, when we talk about things around, say, agility and adapting within the current climate, how have things had to change for you at the Eden project?
Well, I guess we've got, in effect, two different parts of Eden. So we've got the site at Cornwall, which obviously is already open, and so as COVID hit, obviously there's huge disruption to the operations on site, and it did lead us to exploring a number of ways to counter the difficulties that have actually led to huge learning of how we actually want to move forward on a lot of things. Because I think some of that natural disruption does look at the way you look at things, from time tickets to the way you look at cafes, restaurants, F&B, and the whole shebang around that. So I think there's a lot of lessons that have come from that experience in Cornwall, but will naturally feed into the sites that we're developing around the world. But I think, kind of from my perspective, looking at specifically the new destinations, it naturally makes you look at some of the things you're designing. And I think there's kind of that balance that we have to have on the short term. Obviously, COVID has had huge ramifications for the way we might look at physical visitor destinations, but also making sure that doesn't necessarily mean that you end up designing venues that are built for a pandemic. And I think you've got to build in a sense of flexibility and adaptability to the sites we're creating, so that we can try and move with both the black swans and the white swans that are coming in the future. It's also kind of, as John was touching on, it's made us think a little bit further, things that were maybe a couple of years off of looking at more virtual Eden, and Eden not necessarily as a thing that has physical destinations and that's it, but more as this wider universe of connecting nodes up, communities up, to create a broader movement. It's made us really challenge ourselves that everything that we're designing for our physical destinations can have a life beyond the physical destination, so it can create something that has more flexibility in an online world. And I think those bits are starting to move quicker than they would, which is really exciting, and probably wouldn't have necessarily had that fire in its belly without this. So yeah, there's been a lot of changes of thinking, but I think we're still trying to be wary of second guessing 5 years down the line exactly what those experiences might be.
Yeah, it's difficult enough to think what 5 minutes down the line's looking like at the moment. But yeah, I think that, it picks up on some of the things that people were talking about in a previous session around the importance of hybrid experiences and hybrid business models moving forward as well. And I think as well, one of the things that kind of really captures my attention from all of your examples, and we did have a conversation about this before, is the importance of kind of like that social connection and that social communication. And certainly, Susan, within the Big Fix Up, the idea of storytelling underpins the entire kind of Wallace and Gromit adventure, doesn't it? And very much similar with all three. Can you share a little bit there about kind of the importance of creating that social connection and how that's underpinned by the storytelling and opportunities for sharing stories and bringing people together?
I mean, for our side, we really saw this as an opportunity to be sort of cross-generational. Wallace and Gromit is something that appeals to all ages. It's easy to think of it as a kid's product, but I think it's actually more likely the opposite of that. We all grew up, I'm an American, we all did, and I really did grow up with Wallace and Gromit as well. And so we see this as really a wonderful opportunity, especially right now while we're so confined sort of with our immediate family, to share the experience with each other. And so, we've really, from the beginning, plan to make this as inclusive as possible of different ages, different levels of experience. It's not a game, and we get frequently called a game. And we've taken great pains to not have this be a game. It won't be listed as a game on the app stores either, because we don't really want to put people off by the sort of the connotations that video games have, that it's going to be punishing, that there are failure conditions. And we think that the augmented reality aspects of it and mixed reality aspects of it are just so unique and yet overwhelming too, because we're all kind of learning what AR means, that we've really, again, gone to great pains to make it really feel accessible. Nothing's going to punish you. You're not going to have to do things over and over again. And it's something that, a parent will have just as easy a time with as a child. And it's really meant to be something to share together is what we hope.
I think that really important link around that kind of intergenerational relationships and actually doing things together across generations is something that there's a real potential with in terms of digital content and the ways in which we can use these different mixed realities and augmented realities. John, I mean, Dinosaurs and Robots, surely that's going to, if anything's going to bring people together, like Wallace and Gromit, it's going to be dinosaurs and robots across the generations.
Yeah, they are pretty broad themes, and it's one of the reasons why we went with them, because we wanted to make sure we were reaching a broad audience. And obviously, over the years, there's been some pretty fun and very different interpretations of dinosaur and robot stories. And so what we wanted to do was really to sort of push the boundaries of the storytelling around these subject matters that also were that the museums would be comfortable with, because the museums have done an amazing job of bringing in tourists and a sort of a core audience, but there were other groups that they wanted to reach around experience seekers who were going off and doing punch drunk shows or different things like that. And so we tried to work out what it would be to attract them, and the shared experience is really, really important, and being able to have agency within the experience, to be able to genuinely be doing things, influencing the outcomes. And so that's what a lot of our focus has been on. And it's also just wanted to say that it's our full intention to bring back this experience at some point in the latter half of next year. It's just there are bigger issues that need to be resolved first though.
You're anticipating a question that's probably going to be coming down the line, I think, in terms of what happens next. Just kind of, Sam, coming back to you. I mean, the one thing that obviously when we think about convergence and we think about kind of bringing different partners together, and again, the three organisations you're all working for are fantastic examples of doing that. When we think about audiences, and we are kind of future gazing at the moment in terms of what the next steps are going to be. We've talked about the adaptations of existing product and existing experiences, but is there any kind of research that you think would be useful on audience engagement and experience design that are currently missing, for example? I mean, are there insights that you wish you did know but you currently don't have access to?
Well, I guess there's a whole range of things we'd love to know, but from our perspective at Eden, we obviously are quite a mission-driven charity. So we are very aware of our responsibilities as the planetary emergency gets worse, that we don't just want to be a fantastic day out. We genuinely want to be finding ways to impact people's hearts and minds, looking at a range of, impacts on behavior of ways people kind of their lifestyles, the way they relate to people, the ways they get involved in their community. So we do have an aspiration for longer term research on how a day at Eden genuinely can affect your life further on down the line. And of course, this is kind of a big thing that has, I guess, surrounded visitor destinations for a long time of, being a great day out, but how can you actually tell that has informed people's lives down the track? And it's very hard to do so. But I think increasingly with a range of the technologies, looking at different types of virtual platforms, there is increasingly a way to have that type of long-term engagement with people where we can start exploring, are the things you're experiencing on site, are the communal activities, the community programs, engaging you in wider behavioral change. Now, some of that is really hard to tell, but I do think from a broader perspective, if you want to get someone to kind of change their behavior, you make them join a club, you make them join a movement. And I think there's a lot to be said about how do you find different mechanisms to link people up. And I think that's where things are starting to get really exciting for us, not just from a multiple physical destination point, but as you can start improving your virtual world, you can create different forms of connection. So for us, that's really where we would love to be, is having this feedback loop of not just short term, did people like that experience, but slightly longer term of how did that experience lead to meaning.
That idea of that kind of almost longitudinal kind of what happens in X number of months or even years time. So Susan, I know that you had to change the way in which you were gathering feedback during the development of the big fix up. So you had to, as you were testing and the user testing, can you share with us a little bit more about how you were able to achieve that?
Yeah, there's been a heavy focus both within our group, Fictioneers, and also University of South Wales, our research partner, on user research since the beginning. Initially, that was a lot of hands-on, in front of each other user testing at University of South Wales with students there at Ardman. Because of COVID, we identified a tool called Lookback, that our usability group uses. And it's actually been really cool because instead of just having our UX team go out and watch people and observe people and video them, we can actually get the whole team in there. And so it's become like popcorn sessions, come on into the chat, watch someone playing with the app. And so people across the company can actually watch these sessions. They're recorded too, but it's been a really good opportunity for that user research to spread more broadly than to just a couple people who have to then sort of report back into the group. So that's been really good for us. I mean, because there is so much to research, just between the user journey and because what we're doing is a real-time story that's meant to unfold over about a month. We need to understand if people are following the story as they go along, since it's a different way of thinking about a story. We need to understand if people know what to do with augmented reality. So we spent a lot of time on something called AR coaching, where we've really worked hard on a UI that makes AR instantly communicated to a user. Where am I supposed to touch? If I want to scale something, you actually move closer. You don't pinch like you expect to do. So things like that are something we spent a ton of time on, which and now Look Back has allowed us to continue to do.
That's fantastic. And John, any thoughts from you in that regard in terms of how you're able to engage in that feedback? You'd mentioned before that you were getting some very positive feedback from the users of the home-based experiences.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, so that the apps that we produced were done entirely during lockdown. So they were conceived during lockdown, they were released during lockdown, and they were built during lockdown. And there was a lot of user testing that went on during that period. I think it was interesting that there was a debate at the start of the project about, or this phase of the project, about how easy would it be to do user testing. We were very fortunate that we worked with a woman called Lucy Gill, who is a very experienced kids user testing and sort of creative consultant. So if anybody's looking for someone to help in that space, I'd definitely recommend Lucy. But she managed to do all of the user testing remotely. She operated as a one-woman band, sourcing the families, we've got the builds to those families. It was all done over Zoom. She got really, really good qualitative insight that was fed back later that night, so that the product design and code team were implementing changes the next day. So it was very, very iterative, and it worked really well, despite, I think, some concerns at the start that it just wouldn't be possible. So it's one of those surprising things where research can sometimes take a time to get ready and get responses on, but I think we showed that if you get organised and you're focused, you can do it in unexpected circumstances.
Absolutely, a real great example there of that adaptability and a creativity and innovation that we've seen across so many different organisations and so many sectors in the last few months as we've all kind of worked through this new way of living and being. So just kind of coming towards the end of our discussion, time always flies when you're having fun. John, you touched on this earlier around the kind of the future of visitor experiences. What lessons have we learned? It would be, hopefully none of us will be in a situation where we just revert back to how things were. Of course not. So what do you think some of the kind of the future of these experiences is going to look like? The kind of lessons from the here and now, as it were.
Yeah, well, look, it's a really good question. I mean, I think at the minute, you're right to say that the almost looking beyond the next 5 minutes is a challenge because it changes so much. I mean, so many of the great visitor attractions in the UK are kind of just struggling for survival right now. But I think, assuming that there is some sort of return to normality towards the end of 2021, then our kind of expectation is that there's probably going to be quite a lot of pent-up demand for people to go back out and do experiences. You know, the experience economy was booming prior to COVID, and I think if people can be convinced that it is safe, they will go out and have a lot of fun, go to a lot of places. And I think particularly for the culture sector, there's a really interesting opportunity into how it crystallizes the value that it offers to the UK, because, you know, there is going to be quite severe unemployment, there's going to be quite severe mental health challenges, and the role that cultural organizations can play in creativity, inspiring people. I think even though it feels pretty painful right now, they can play a really strong role going forward. And so we're excited by what those possibilities are.
Fantastic, John. You sparked a little bit of questioning in the chat here. Can you please repeat Lucy's name? Your plug for her is work to
I promise I'm not on commission either. So Lucy Gill, Gill, and I think her company is Digill, Digill. But if somebody wants to contact me through the Factory 42 website, I will definitely connect you with her.
Perfect, that's great. So Sam, coming to you then on the kind of the future of visitor experiences then, the lessons from that we've had and how we can take these forward.
Yeah, I mean, obviously kind of being light on your feet is important. I think the way we've started imagining a lot of our spaces are looking at how we fuse different mediums, so we don't necessarily have a focus just upon one is quite important. But I think that naturally leads to an approach which we are finding really exciting anyway. So I think if you were to take our Cornwall site, you know, our rainforest has embedded exhibits and artworks, and just for sheer size of a place is extraordinary as a set. But I think as we move into, for example, our projects in Qingdao, from the start, we've been planning spaces within these giant planted environments for immersive digital experiences to see the invisible cycles of water moving through the forest, looking at embedding large-scale performance and spectacle within these spaces in the actual design rather than adding on. And then once we've honed these techniques, we bring them back to kind of Cornwall as the mothership to make sure that it's always the exemplar. I think as a whole, though, we're really keen to make sure that, you know, we aren't necessarily set back on the path of what we were imagining and how that can fit into these new spaces, and trying to make sure that we aren't creating just passive walk-through spaces is going to be kind of a really important thing for engaging people in the type of storytelling we're doing. And I mean, for example, in Morecambe, we're imagining these environments that are constantly having their own rhythms. They're constantly changing. So using the rhythms of sun and moon to make these spaces that are constantly morphing. And I think that's kind of where we're getting excited by a lot of this visitor experience, is in the setting where we can combine many things in a space which in and of itself is always kind of flexible, adapting.
The art of the possible is incredible, isn't it? So, you know, that idea, and again, that brings us nicely to Susan and the work that you're doing. I mean, this idea of you know, bringing people together through storytelling and through different possibilities. I mean, where do you see the next steps, the next few years?
Well, I'd say it's a couple things. I think that I would hope that going back to the idea of a hybrid model, that we don't throw away what we've learned over the last year, which is that it is possible to have really magical experiences online when you can't get there. You know, some of the things going on in theater, these sort of live Zoom performances, what David Tennant did with Michael Sheen on BBC, which I thought was amazing. I'd love to see stuff like that continue, especially because it's so inclusive. It means that wherever you are in the world, you can have these experiences. You don't have to make it to London to have a specific, you know, science museum experience. You can have that anywhere. So that's just a wonderful thing, especially for children, you know, around the world. So I would hope that sort of thing can continue. And then, you know, for us, you know, we're really trying to continue to push the boundaries of what a real-time story means. You know, we're going to continue to build on the platform side, what that means in terms of how we can bring people to locations, how we can sort of encourage descent onto a place once that's possible because of what's going on in the story. You know, I think we're all missing those sort of watershed, you know, the water cooler moments of you know, things that are happening in storytelling. You know, everything has gone to this binge watching right on Netflix, and I really miss, you know, what happened in Game of Thrones last night, conversations. And so I think that one of the things we're hoping about with the Big Fix Up is that we can bring some of that back, the idea that a story unfolds slowly and that we can share those moments together. I feel like it's something that we've started to lose.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful point. I mean, we've come to the end, as always. Time, as I said before, time just does disappear so quickly. I mean, it's such powerful point to end on, you know, that how we can actually use these experiences to create and continue to create communities, in effect, you know, through storytelling, through bringing exhibitions to life and new and in different ways, but actually learning a lot around the agility and the adaptability that we've all experienced over the recent months. And so, look, there are so many questions that we haven't had the chance to even get onto, but we will be, for those of you who are interested, we will be continuing the conversation through a live Q&A in the spaces, in the session spaces, which you can find on the left side of your hop-in screen. But thank you so much to our panelists, to Susan, to Sam, and to John for joining us and giving us insights into what are really world-leading and fantastic examples of mixed and augmented realities and visitor experiences. So thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome everybody. That's us. We're in our Q&A, live Q&A now. So welcome to all of those who have joined us in the live Q&A. Please do feel free to start typing your questions and we will crack onto those as soon as we can. Before we do that, I would like to introduce Jamie Ennis. Now, Jamie is a co-founder of Fictioneers with over 20 years experience of design leadership in the creation of delightful, engaging experiences across multiple platforms and brands. Jamie, you built teams and inspired design thinkings at Spotify, at Microsoft, at Nokia, Melody VR, and you actually launched the world's first live 360 performance in VR on the Oculus Go and Gear VR. So great to have you with us on the panel. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for introducing us. And it's great to be part of the Q&A session.
Brilliant. So just continuing the conversation that we were having on the main stage there, with one of the questions that did come through, and I do hope the person who asked it is in the room, was around, with all these really exciting kind of opportunities that mixed reality, augmented reality and VR hold, you know, yes, that's great for education, but a lot of education institutions don't necessarily have the infrastructure to be able to support them. So what kind of experiences have you had in working in education environments, if any, and kind of how did you overcome those challenges, I suppose? Because that's quite a key thing, I think, when we're talking about reaching out to wider audiences, especially around children. Who wants to take that first?
I could just give a general observation. So in that, you know, the making the product is just part of the battle. It's how you get it to people, and getting it to children is harder because of the regulations around it. And also, so for example, we've just released these two what we would call fun learning apps on iOS and on Android. And we're promoting them through our partners. They're being well reviewed, well liked, but we get very little data on what's actually what the usage is because of the regulations around them. And it makes it quite challenging to work out what is and isn't working. And so to try and improve the product iteratively is you have to rely on sort of qualitative research that you can do in much sort of lower volumes, quite often informally. So it's that's a real challenge there in terms of how you reach these groups. And so that would just be one of my sort of observations, which is, you know, the marketing is a big part of the battle. And even when you get to the audience, sometimes because it's kids, the data you get back isn't particularly enlightening.
Susan, have you got any experiences in this particular area?
It is more challenging. You know, when we started out the project, our plan had been to actually, I think Jamie reminded me, I think it was 14 plus we were saying, because of some of the social media aspects of the project. Once COVID struck, one of the decisions we made was to sort of tone down some of the social media aspects of the project so that we could support a broader audience. And so then it suddenly became more relevant to be testing with children. And Jamie's actually really involved in that. Jamie, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about how we're doing user testing with kids or what we have been able to do.
Yeah, so hello everyone. For our wonderful IP of Aardman, you know, their age range is like 8 to 80. So, you know, clearly we need to be talking to everyone when it comes to our experience. And it's and clearly, you know, when you start to think of the younger audience, a lot of our testing has been with younger audience, but in a family environment. So in the early parts of our project, that was easy. You can bring families together, and you come to Ardman, show them product, and start iterating together. But actually, in the COVID world, that actually now is our challenge: is how do you safely, with all the kind of the governance that surrounds it, collaborate and make creative experiences like this that support children and their experience with this type of entertainment, Wallace and Gromit. And it's had its challenges, but we've also been, at the same time, we're trying to be working with, reaching out to schools to help, start sharing the product experience there to get feedback, but in a wider group experience. But again, that gets challenged by whether schools are open or not. So it's well, recently that's our new challenge. So it was talked about earlier that our great use of look back was a great way of reaching people into their homes, because they could install our app and install look back, and we can learn what they're doing. But you cannot do that with that type of audience with children. So we're kind of, it was, these new barriers were brought to us that have made it harder, but our intent's there to constantly kind of engage through family and children for feedback. And like Susan says, there's now an age range where you can talk and discuss things in a slightly different capacity.
Another thing that we did to engage with kids early on, Ardman does a lot with schools, and they brought us an opportunity to get involved with the Intellectual Property Office. And so this is pre-COVID, this all happened, but there was a contraptions competition, Kraken Inventions, I think it was called, that allowed school children to design a contraption for Wallace. And one of the prizes was that design would appear in our experience, which did happen. And we actually, we were able to talk to the child who designed this and show him what the result was of his work. And so that was a really kind of delightful way to get kids involved in the big fix-up from early on.
That's fantastic. I really love that idea of that kind of the design and that kind of the kids being involved in that. Now, Sam, you obviously within Eden Project, whether it's in Cornwall or international and all these wonderful developments you've got around the world, as you absolutely were stating during the panel session, I mean, education is central to a lot of what you're doing. So how do you kind of navigate the world of kind of creating the mixed reality, augmented reality, or these wonderful new virtual worlds, and with that education alignment?
Yeah, I mean, it's true dipping of toes territory for us, because I guess we've had for a couple of decades now award-winning education programs that bring people to site, and then working with teachers to use kind of a natural world as part of a curriculum. So we've kind of got education that goes down from preschool all the way through to degree level, and so we've had a model that has been pretty much based on more physical contact with people coming to site or training teachers who then go beyond. And so we've been increasingly looking at how some of the tools we're developing can work on that level. We're starting to kind of explore that a little bit more fully over the next year or so, and looking at how things such as kind of virtual tours, for example, can start kind of feeding into schools. But I think we are similarly being quite careful about how that fits into our kind of ongoing program. What's the difference between actually going into classrooms, and what's the difference of providing things that are for children within the home? And I think that's something which is very much kind of watch this space and what we're doing, because it's quite central. But I would be slightly wary of speaking on behalf of our education team.
So I'm just picking up, there's a couple of questions coming through on the chat here. I'm going to pick up Becky Parry. You're asking very much in alignment with the points we're discussing here around education. One, is there space for a creative industry to be lobbying governments to look at the greater collaborations? I'm rephrasing your question, sorry, between our industry and education. So the idea of that lobbying, but also Becky's also raised the point as well about actually investing in technology and investing in technology solutions. So again, do you have thoughts around that, building on what you've just been sharing in terms of your existing relationships or partnerships opportunities that you're engaging in school? Do you see a situation where actually when you go into the schools there's a lack of tech know-how, there's a lack of, not necessarily a willingness, but a commitment to engaging because of this sense of lacking expertise? Who wants to have a go at that one?
I can try a partial answer if you want. I don't profess to be an expert on this at all, but so the apps that we have just put out are augmented reality apps. So they work on very, very recent phones. So they really are about it was about R&D and pushing the kind of the state of the art. And so they weren't going to work on a lot of historic phones. And so just from personal experience, I've got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and there's plenty of class WhatsApp groups and the like, and we sort of put this out there to see what people thought, and some people like, my phone doesn't work, it hasn't got the right technology. But what was interesting is that because the kids thought it was fun and it was a game, and it wasn't homework in any way, shape or form, they were all doing it and all really enjoying it and kind of just engaging it in a way that was really quite exciting. I'm not sure that it's interesting. I think that they as an audience liked it. I'm not sure we'd have had so much luck pushing it through traditional educational channels because it wasn't seen as educational. And I think somehow how education and inspired learning or fun learning is defined is a sort of, I think it's definitely a thing for debate, because based on the research that we have seen and the children we've seen firsthand playing this, they are learning, playing, understanding and doing a lot of real genuine things that are helping their development. It's not directly linked to the curriculum, but it is having a positive impact. And I think it's how we describe those impacts. I think it's just an interesting source of debate, really.
Absolutely. The idea of that creative learning and opening up alternative spaces of play, and play is learning. There's so much research and insight in that area already. I'd like to move us on. Agnieszka is asking a question. So it's saying, she says, it looks like all of you are audience centric, but this is not a standard approach for the tech sector investing in technology, but not really in building an audience base. Do you agree with this observation? And can you help somehow with the change of this attitude so we see more of an audience-based perception rather than a tech focus? Jamie, can I come to you on that one first?
Not sure
I suppose it's the focus of the audience and how we can actually increase the attentiveness and the attention we pay to the audience. So thinking through kind of the big fix up, obviously the storytelling and the audience for you was central to what it was you were doing, because it relies so much on this kind of mutual storytelling. But I suppose what Agnieszka is saying is maybe that's not something that we see so much in the wider tech sector.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, there's as kind of John mentioned with this, we're telling stories and they're fundamental to us all, but we're trying to innovate and do thought leadership on that storytelling, which is led by some of the technologies we've mixed. But we've mixed some in the big fix up. We've mixed a whole range of types of media types to help tell that story, but some of them are more advanced than others. So actually, when it came to the more advanced, like augmented reality, we're having to teach them about the technology. And that's constant, that's sometimes perceived as a barrier, because what you really want them is to keep being entertained and that you can flow from comics to videos to light level gameplay, and then all of a sudden AR turns up, and then AR is wonderfully world immersive, but requires you to have the phone and the experience and the knowledge of what to do, and it does new things that no one's seen before, when around you, and think, well, what's happening? And so there is this wonderful balance of it. It is audience first. Storytelling has to be around the audience. You get them engaged, but you don't want to lose or detract from that over a real-time storytelling experience. But then technology comes along, it helps, but sometimes it creates some barriers that we've had challenges with, but we're getting over them, and because you need to keep the consistent storytelling experience throughout.
Yeah, that really understanding the audience engagement, understanding the audience reaction and response to things, and kind of what we were talking about before, the real need to continually research that. And I suppose perhaps what Agnieszka is referring to is the idea that actually I suppose maybe not all tech companies or tech providers do that, but surely when it comes to visitor experience, Sam, John, you know, when we're looking at building robots and dinosaurs, or we're looking at kind of virtual waterfalls in China, you know, it has to be based around that audience engagement. It has to be based around the reaction that you're going to get. And it's not always just oh, well, that's nice. Sometimes it's a really quite a deep emotional reaction that people will have to things. You know, it's about triggering more than just oh, well, that was a nice, fun thing to do for 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in first, Jonathan, hand it over. I guess, well, we at Eden generally prefer not to use technology unless we have to, and that's not kind of dismissing it, but we find quite often as personal or tactile as experiences, for as much of that as you can do without technology, we use that. And then we bring in technology when we can't do it through any other means, and we can show people things that they can't otherwise see. But I think for some of our spaces, what we're trying to do is create more cohesive story worlds. So there's not this break of going from gallery to gallery, and now you're in the tech part, now you're in the art gallery. They all kind of have to have this inner working to themselves, so people feel like they are in this space where we can tell our stories. And so one of the challenges we had before with the headsets was, as much as we loved some of the content that was coming out on it, is how do you scale that up to a point where people aren't queuing, or you don't have exactly, as Jane was talking about, the whole introduction of you have to do this and you have to do that. How can we create these experiences where they can kind of flow so that the technology can seem magical? Like there's that blurring. You're not crossing this threshold between one world and the other. It's seamless. And I guess in some ways, COVID, with the natural kind of wariness people will have about headsets, maybe starts pointing us a little bit in that direction of maybe we need to look beyond just headsets in these environments. And, you know, we've been working with, I see Adam's on the call as well from Vision 3, and with our chums at Marshmallow Laser Feast as well. How do we take this amazing content and not necessarily rely on the headset approach? Because I think to create those communal experiences, as much as there are some really interesting ways that headset experiences were becoming communal, we prefer to actually have that physicality there as well. So I think that's kind of where we, not saying we'll have huge influence on the tech industry on it, but I think as far as the destinations, that's how we'd like to utilize it more, as this trick that, you know, does seem a little bit like magic rather than a tech bit at the back.
Yeah, interesting. John, what's your thoughts in that area?
Well, so going back to the original question about it not being a standard approach for, so if you're saying we're audience centric, and that sometimes, I think my understanding of this question is that if the tech sector is investing in technology but not really building an audience base, certainly what I've seen over the years, having worked, I came into the company I'm running now from the world of television, and generally the innovations that you see in TV and also that you've seen in VR and AR, the ones that have succeeded have been married with really good content or experiences. You know, it's no use talking about a brand new TV with incredible resolution or a new headset with incredible audio if there is nothing to look at or hear. And unfortunately, that is what's quite often happened. And I think you've seen some of these, particularly some of the big hardware platform sellers, have gone to market perhaps a bit early. And so if you take something like 3D TV, the people who watch 3D TV loved it. It scored off the charts in terms of engagement and audience reaction, but there just wasn't very much to watch, and they quickly tired of watching the same thing. And I think that, you know, in a world where people have more entertainment and content choices than they've ever had before, and you have to absolutely earn their right, you need to put great content in there. Often great content is founded on great stories. It's no use just having a really cool screen or some great speakers, because that's just not enough.
I think that brings us back to the, you know, that we've talked before, and certainly what's been addressed in different platforms in the conference so far has been around the idea of digital first, and actually understanding audience needs, but making sure that the content that is created is actually for that particular purpose. It's not repurposed from somewhere else. So understanding what the technology is that you have, what the audience needs is, and Agnieszka's just coming back here and saying, yes, technology, content and audience investment, having that kind of holistic approach to understanding what it is you're doing and why becomes absolutely crucial in terms of investments that are being made. Does that also then raise the question about the appropriateness of technology and how different technologies can be used more or less appropriately in different settings? You know, so Sam, you were talking there about maybe VR headsets are not always the way forward for you, but it looks like you're going down the kind of the virtual waterfalls, etc., maybe more LED screens and simulations in that regard.
Just unmuting myself. Still 9 months in, and just the basics sometimes avoid us. Yeah, I mean, we're looking at kind of a range of kind of projections and screens, and among other things. I think for us, it's all about how we are trying to kind of embed those within environments where it doesn't kind of scream, here's the LED screen. And I think, you know, some of the design challenges, for example, in Qingdao, in our big rainforest biomes, you know, how do you create spaces within a really humid, hot space, which don't feel like you're opening the big air-conditioned door into this world. And you know, those are the battles, and you know, some of these spaces are easier than others. So our project in the mines in Portland are a lot easier because it's a relatively stable condition. It's dark, and you don't have those same constraints. So I think we have to harness kind of the technology and the hardware we use very specifically for the projects we're using, because they are very bespoke.
Come in. Can I add to that? What? Oh, sorry, I didn't pick up. Caroline, you're on mute. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, we're all doing these kind of schoolboy errors here. Okay, yeah, Jamie, do come in. Yes, absolutely.
It was it's like a plug for the big fix up. There was we are in a wonderful place where, you know, you're working with Wallace and Gromit, who love to invent, and they invent contraptions, and actually our technology connection to that allows us to then experiment and be a little bit kind of thought leadership in how would Wallace have use augmented reality. And so we have a little bit of, you know, protection of experimentation, because we're using this technology to do a level of kind of thought leadership of what's possible with it. But actually it's in our storytelling world, it's helping us tell this story, and it's really quite disruptive of how it's allowing our IP of Wallace and Gromit to really now use technology to bring into your world around you. And that at the beginning of the project wasn't as available, but now thanks to Unity and technologies allowing you to bring that IP of creative and technology into your space around you through your devices is very, you know, innovative. But our IP helps us be playful in that space, level of forgiveness in it. Yeah. But incredibly fun.
I mean, exactly, that idea of playfulness. And it kind of comes back to, I mean, we ourselves have been doing some research. I'll take an opportunity to plug my own work in this area. But we've been doing some research on kind of AR in museums. And when we first started doing it, I walked in and it was an older demographic. And of course, I fell into the trap of thinking, oh gosh, this isn't going to work. But actually, the playfulness of an audience was such that, yeah, they had a wonderful time playing about, moving around the space, seeing things in different ways, really looking at how they can connect in different ways. And that kind of then brings me to a point, Jamie, just picking up on what you were saying there about, you know, taking things to people in new ways. But how can we begin when we're looking at the big fix up, when we're looking, John, at you know, the robots and dinosaurs, and when we're looking, Sam, at the Eden projects? I mean, how can we make sure that accessibility and inclusion in visitor experiences and audience experiences is there? So how as organizations do you address issues around accessibility to make sure that these opportunities are as accessible for all as they can be? Susan, oh, Sam, on you go. Yep.
I mean, relatively briefly, I mean, quite simply, you have to bake it in from the very start of the design process. Like we can't keep on adding it on at the end and thinking we're doing a good job. So, I mean, at Eden, we work with the Sensory Trust, who work with us on all of our new projects and work with us for 20 years. And I think we have to be aware that this is something that has to be at the front and center of design and can't be added on. And we're looking at it from kind of bigger venue design as well as individual experiences. But I think that it is true for all of those different sizes of design.
Yeah. John, how did you find that when you were designing and looking at the robots and dinosaurs?
So I think what Sam says, you've got to bake it in from the start. So the robots and dinosaurs experience, the mixed reality experience, uses a Magic Leap headset, and so that is basically, it's like a big pair of goggles that go around there, not as big as a virtual reality headset, but to give you an example of how that didn't necessarily work for certain audiences. So for example, if you had long shiny hair, it was more likely to slip down. If you had some kind of head covering, it was likely to sort of get tangled. If you were audio was delivered not in the ear but close to the ear, and so there were challenges around people who had audio impairments, and so there was a lot of different things that we had to work with. Also, the lenses come in a fairly standard form, and it's hard to wear glasses underneath them, so you can wear contact lenses, but you can't put the headsets over glasses, so that raised some issues as well. And these, I guess, are some of the challenges of working with early stage technology, where it's sort of never quite where you want it to be. I think that's the big challenge, and it's how do you make it work for as many people as possible. But we had definitely some instances where we couldn't make it as good an experience as we wanted to do for some audiences. So it was trying to be creative about what was possible as much as anything.
Susan, how about you guys? Oh, sorry, Jamie, did you come
Yeah,
in
sorry,
there?
I was going to jump in there on this subject. It is a fact. It's a really important subject, and how Sam talks about how it needs to be considered at the beginning and throughout the project. But what happens when it comes to technology that has no foundational manifesto to follow when it becomes to kind of accessibility? And augmented reality potentially doesn't have the cheat sheet or the guidance or the principles that you need to adhere. We're building those now. So, it was very key that you can build it in when it's familiar to you, and you can go say, accessibility standards and OS levels of adaptability, and then you kind of think, oh, we're mixing visuals, audio, and augmented reality. How do you describe an object, in this space? Well, actually, we are the leaders in that world doing this work. We help input into what are those kind of guidance for more accessible augmented reality, as one example. And my previous company, it was VR, and again, you had tentative guiding principles, but they need to evolve, and this industry needs to start shaping those, because as a media, it's incredibly rich and immersive, but it needs to be as accessible as possible. And unfortunately, like our previous comment earlier, we have device ranges that we can only drive some of these behaviors on, or the form factors of the devices are becoming constraints, which is why you do need that tech audience experience coming together and trying to form some standards that we hit always, and then we improve on going forward.
Just to echo that, I mean, when we're working with Magic Leap technology, which is, they've done some incredible things with those headsets, but they're also probably not at the point that everybody would like them to be. And there were stages in our project where we were delivering things that nobody on the planet had delivered before, and were like the result of extraordinarily smart, dedicated people delivering kind of things against the odds. And yet there was also times when on the project we were asked, what about this? What about that? What about this policy? What about that? And, the reality is it's just really early tech. And if you're doing R&D projects and you are pushing the boundaries, I think there needs to be an understanding that not everything is going to be perfect. And if you sort of all gather together and say, look, this is where we're trying to get to, we accept it's not going to be perfect and it's going to be challenging, then I think it's how you work towards a point is probably one of the most important things, because new tech is just not perfect, but it throws up some really interesting insights that can inform future development of experiences.
It's one of the reasons I think mobile is so important to adoption of AR, and one of the reasons we made that decision in the project is that these headsets are really expensive. I think everyone involved in AR and VR knows that's where it's headed. Clearly, we don't want to be holding something in our hands if it can just be on our face. you know, and I saw in one of the questions of we should need to stop talking about AR and VR. Totally agree. Eventually it's one headset, right? Or glasses or a chip in your head that lets you do all these things. But to get there, we need to explain the use case holistically to people, which is why I think projects like, you know, the Audience of the Future stuff is so important, because it's providing use case. It's not about gimmicks of technology. It's about, why do I really care? What's the point of all of this? And, you know, that's what we're trying to do, so that people do get on board and eventually they are willing to spend the money on the headsets, right? But I think mobile is really important to accessibility right now.
Yeah, and understanding, as you say, understanding the audience needs, understanding that there is such a difference between the kind of the cutting edge R&D that's taking place over here, and then the kind of the wider adoption of that within the wider population. There's always going to be a lag there, isn't there? We're very kind of, we're still very far away from it being everyone adopting the latest cutting edge. So, but I'm going to come back to a question by Arnie actually. So it's really interesting that, you know, John, you're using Dinosaurs and Robots. You know, Susan, James, you're using you know, Wallace and Gromit. There's a kind of the question here is, do you think early audiences need incentive like a big IP that Wallace and Gromit are? So that kind of idea that there's that hook, a reason that's beyond just using it for technology's sake, you know, that's going to attract people in the first place. You don't get much bigger than Wallace and Gromit, really. Certainly.
Well, I think it's important, because I think you can only throw so much at a user that they don't understand. Right. And so I think the framing of a universe that you understand is always easier. You can only be innovative in so many areas. And so clearly, I think we'd all love to get to a place where it's about original IP as well and doing brand new things. But, you know, for us, for example, we're not, you know, the big fix up happens to have a lot of augmented reality, but it's not an AR project. It's a real-time storytelling project. And, you know, our belief is that entertainment lines are starting to blur. But I don't think that's a big leap to ask anyone to accept, you know, that games and film and other formats are all starting to blur together. And so we're trying to sort of emerge a new form of entertainment, or an augmented story. And so for that, you have to start with stuff that people know. I think to try to do that, and then to try to create a brand new story on top of that no one has any vested interest in, is just a bit too much to swallow, and expensive too, the marketing involved in that. You know, the reason why Innovate asked us to bring in an IP on this was partially because R&D funding isn't meant to be spent on marketing. So there has to be a way to get this out there, and a you know, a way to market it to people, to get it in front of more people. And so that's also, you know, a big reason for it. But I do think there's going to be absolutely a place for new stories being told this way, for sure.
So that then kind of brings us into, we've got about 5 minutes left on our Q&A at the moment, but it brings us into kind of going back to what we were talking about in the main panel session, which is around the, okay, so what does the future hold in this? I think we've talked a lot about, you know, yes, I agree, that whole kind of AR, VR coming together, making things appropriate, the appropriate adoption of technology. You know, actually, you know, with things like the mixed reality storytelling, actually using people's own devices that they're very used to using. There's a normality, there's a familiarization that's already there. But where do you see the kind of, it's almost like we have this fusion of lots of different types of technology solutions, from the ones that you need your own smartphone right through to the ones that you will go and you will experience when we can get back to being location based, you know, where you go and you experience things kind of as you walk through the museum doors, or as you walk through the theatre, or Sam, as we all come and visit these wonderful developments that are going on across the world for Eden. So in terms of the next 5 years, how do you see technology and kind of visitor experience? How do you see it developing? Sam, will we come to you first on that one?
I guess you can come to, I guess, the least informed of actually where we're going to be actual hardware technology-wise in 5 years. But I think what we started off as not really being particularly educated in the world of tech, and increasingly we kind of got a gang of fellow travelers around us who did understand it. And I think for us, when we're speaking with the rest of our teams in Eden, that there's kind of the slight, not cynicism about technology, but what is it going to do for us type angle? Is it going to actually create more disconnection from nature than actual connection, which we're looking for? I guess that has always led us back to we don't want to be kind of building in redundancy in big investments in technology. But what we do really want to be doing is making sure, as John and others have been talking about, that the content we're creating is amazing, and doesn't become, if the content doesn't become as redundant, then that protects us a little bit. And I think we are not necessarily kind of immersed in that world of looking at the latest hardware 5 years out in the way that the answers from the rest of the panel will be able to say. But I think for us, we want to make sure that if the content is embedded within the space and it feels right and it's telling stories, it won't ever feel as dated as it would be if it wasn't telling the right story in the right place. So I think that's kind of our focus, is on the storytelling and the content side, rather than the tech.
Absolutely. It picks up on some of the comments that are coming through on the chat as well about making sure the experience is great, the content is great, that kind of the interactivity and the, you know, Susan, we've spoken before about the kind of the social communication and that kind of the relationship building and the more kind of the personable, meaningful side of technology. So Susan, can I come to you on that? In terms of next developments, I know kind of we've still to see the formal launch of the big fix up, but you know, what's happening next in these areas? 5 years time.
Whew. the magic ball on that. I guess, you know, when we started this project last year, we spent a decent amount of time on looking at all the technologies that were out there and trying to validate the best way to do each aspect of this experience. What's the latest and greatest in AR, in LiDAR scanning, and satellite scanning, and in mixed reality, all these different things. And, you know, we put together a project around it. The problem is there's so much unstable technology out there right now. And so we had to make a lot of decisions based on when we thought things would be done. And there are things that we really wanted to use in the project that we just knew we're never going to make it by our deadline. And so I would hope more standards come into play, because I think if someone tried to do a project like this, we know now the pain points that they would go through and how hard it is to think about just the methodology of bringing all these disparate pieces together. We hope our Must platform is going to help with some of that and make it easier in the future for us to think about this, iterate on it. But it's still really challenging. There's no blueprint out there for how to make these sorts of immersive experiences. And it's just because there's so many different pieces of technology, but there isn't a lot that unites them. So I would hope that there'll just be more standards. It'll just be much easier. Also, you know, the sort of AR layer that everyone's guessing is coming. You know, Magic Leap wanted to build a Magicverse. Microsoft has their Azure spatial anchors. You know, there are all these different sort of formats. So they're thinking about what's the layer on the city so that we can get there. And I can just, what can I do today? What are the AR experiences I can have and or VR experiences I can have? So that has to get built. And I think maybe that's further than 5 years in the future, but I think that that's definitely going to be a key, because then it's much easier for us to just be freed up from technology and just focused on creating the stories.
Absolutely. And I love that. Again, fits very nicely with the theme of the day around convergence, you know, that learning from the experiences and potentially the mistakes and opportunities that other people have realized as they've developed these wonderful experiences that have taken to people. Jamie, can I come to you on that? Is there anything else you would like to add on that?
Yeah, and I was kind of actually, the group was speaking. There was the stuff I want to index on, but it is such a big topic, and there's just a couple of things that I've observed and seen, and you can see it in shifts. And one is the quality of real world digital interactions is going to shift dramatically from what we've seen. So I wasn't expecting this year to be landing rockets in my garden or playing with the techno trousers in those places in such a realistic way, where I was concentrating on shadows behaving correctly with their objects that are connected to them. I wasn't expecting to have made that shift, that objects were going to be placed in spaces and know their spaces, and that those spaces they were doing that in were mine. It was my front room. It was, and I didn't make that shift this year to such an extent where you kind of go fast forward that immersion. Objects and storytelling that are digital, that can work around you, potentially could be quite incredible, where we're getting more into digital conversations over what is digital and what is not.
Yeah.
And that I think is a wonderful area to just observe, because it will make storytelling richer. It will bring people into spaces. We're playing in the world of bringing a fictional space. You go into their world, but who knows where that will go next with different story, IPs, etc. But that is one thing I wasn't expecting this year, and that will be even better, I think.
That greater fusion of the blended realities and just having these integrated spaces, there's so much potential there. And then thinking about how that then connects with that user experience and how even more deeply enriched and personal that becomes is just fascinating. John, I'm going to come to you as a last contribution to this point, but you also have an additional question that's come in from the chat. So the question has come: do you have a strategy for audiences' repeat engagement with the project around dinosaurs and robots?
So yes, so basically depending on which of our sort of things that we're making that you describe, but if you take our location-based experiences, we hope that they will be the sorts of things that you will want to play again. You know, the outcome can be different depending on what happens. You can inform the you know, the way the story progresses. And in terms of the apps, certainly on the robot app we built for kids, there's many levels, many different forms of progression, scores you can do. So yes, we're trying to make sure that audiences come back and continue. So yes, that's very much what we're trying to do.
Fantastic. I think that's one of the key things, isn't it? Creating experiences that aren't just a one-off, you know, that are going to get people coming back for more. And John, your final, just to bring the conversation to a close then, because we are now running out of time, your thoughts in terms of the next 5 years, where things are going to go? Yeah,
well, I mean, I think Jamie captured some of the points really well. I mean, I think we're really excited at Factory 42 about the blending of physical and digital worlds in an increasingly accurate and realistic way. I mean, I've got the new iPhone 12, it's got the LiDAR scanner built into it. That is a real big step forward in terms of what you can do. Our dinosaur app, that dinosaur will recognize humans and respond to them in different ways. There are things like occlusion and various other sort of tricks of the trade that you're now starting to be able to merge together to make more and more realistic things. And I think that for visitor experiences like museums, where they've got these incredible buildings and these incredible physical collections, the ability to augment those with really like cleverly positioned and integrated digital things, those possibilities become far greater over the next few years. Whether it's 5 years, I don't know, whether it's longer, but it's certainly an exciting prospect.
Yeah, it's certainly on its way, isn't it? Well, just to say to you all, we've now run out of time, but just to say thank you ever so much. It's been such a fascinating session, the panel session and the Q&As. Thank you to everyone in the audience who has joined us for this live Q&A and for the questions that have come through. And finally, John, Jamie, Susan, Sam, thank you all very much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Take care, guys.
Thanks. Caroline. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.